Now, here's your host, Reverend Temple Hayes.
And welcome, everyone, and I'm so glad that you've taken time of your life to listen to our show and to continue to follow us and spread the good word to your people in your social media network about the show From Good to Amazing. You're joining us with Unity FM, the voice of the awakening world, Unity Online Radio. And a guest that I had at the beginning last year when I first started the show, the wonderful and incredible, gifted, talented David Friedman, is joining us today with the concept and the idea, the thought exchange. David, thank you for being on our show. I was so excited. After your book's been out for a year, I know you've been leading workshops and programs for a long time on the thought exchange, but with the milestone of your book being out for a year and now a new documentary out, I was just real excited to have you back with us. Thank you for being here.
Well, I always like an opportunity to hang out with you and chat with you in whatever medium, so I'm very glad to be here.
Oh, yeah, it's thrilling. Well, I just want you to know from just our community's perspective and from myself personally that I really identified, and that's the reason I wanted to have this show in the first place, is not just to be on a radio show, but to really make a difference in one way or another. If people could walk away from each show they listen to and have one golden nugget or two, I knew that the show would be worthwhile, because that's what we're looking for now in New Thought. And positiveness is practical application. And so when you were talking about a year ago, you were giving examples about how you feel a sensation in your belly. And you were making this reference of how all these years on Broadway or off Broadway, when you get ready to perform, you still feel the sensation. You're aware that it's there, you recognize it, and you go, hey, how you doing? To the sensation. But yet you just keep moving forward.
Yeah, the thing is that the sensation is part of you and part of it. And so I find that, this was the thing that was sort of in my way when I did New Thought. Everyone seemed to think that you're supposed to feel good, and you're actually supposed to feel the way you feel, whatever that is. And so I just found that when I could get in touch with that and be with that, I began to notice that, this is generally the way I feel when I go on a stage. So I stopped calling it bad. I stopped calling it frightening. I stopped calling it, something that had to be gotten rid of. And I just had it. And so I now call it the sensation that I feel when I go on a stage. And, it's interesting. I was doing a thought exchange in Los Angeles, and a man who was in his 60s spoke up, and he said, I'm going back to college right now, and I was always thought of as stupid, and I was not a good student. And so now that I'm in college at 60, I'm getting straight A's, but I still think I'm stupid. So I said, well, what makes you think you're stupid? What do you feel? And he said, well, when I get an A, I feel this tightness in my chest. Now, that tightness in his chest is actually there because had he dared to be smart when he was younger, he got criticized, and that's why he thinks he's stupid. So anytime he's smart, he's going to get that sensation. And so what we did was we changed that sensation from that means I'm stupid to that is the sensation that you get when you're smart. And so he gets a tightness in his chest when he gets a great grade. So that now tells him he must be smart. It's, one of the big challenges is that it is the positive thoughts that we dared to think a positive thought and we got hurt a long time ago. It is the positive thoughts that often make us anxious, that often create a difficult sensation. So people get caught in this merry-go-round. They're trying to think positive, they think positive, and then they feel awful, so they think, there must be something wrong. So they take on the negative thought, and they think, I can't do this, and then they're in the negative thought again. And then they try to think positive again, and they don't feel good, and they interpret that thought as terrible. If you can feel whatever you feel when you take on the positive thought. If you feel a tightness in your stomach, if you feel a tightness in your chest, if you feel like you're choking, if you feel nauseous, if you feel achy, feel it. And then you can hold that thought, and that's the way your life will look.
I love that. And I've been working with this idea all weekend. I love sound bites and, various quotes. And the one I've been working with is we create the habits and then the habits create us. And that's so true, what you're saying, obviously, and you've heard it, from so many people. Years ago, I was doing some coaching and mentoring to a couple that had at one time been extremely wealthy. And because what they identified, because of the wealth, they became unhealthy. They made some choices that weren't so great for them, and they overindulged, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like you're saying, what happened every time they would start to get a step back up, or they would start to overcome or have a new window that would create more success, they would feel the sensation, uh-oh, danger's coming, we're going to make wrong choices now, and so they would sabotage their good.
Yep.
And it was only until they could make that association. I know for me, a number of years ago, when I remember the first time I told my father about 2 or 3 things I was doing and how much money I was making for that particular thing. And compared to what he would assimilate or his own experience in his own worth, that was like a big freaking deal to him, And I remember the look in his eyes, like, oh my gosh, I had affected him some way and his self-worth. Now, I was taking it on, I get that, but still, it became real to me. And so for a while, I would have this sensation of, oh my gosh, I have exceeded my parents. I am much more successful than my parents are. And so I would feel this sensation like, this is not okay. And I had to work with that quite a while, in my 20s, to get to that place of, no, this is a good thing.
Well, you see, these sensations come from a long time ago. So, for instance, we've been doing a lot of work with inner child and infancy based on thought exchange. And what happens is, you see, if you got the signal from your parents that in some way for you to be successful would diminish them, or if you thought or felt a certain thing, they would be hurt or couldn't tolerate it. Now, when you're a little child, you cannot afford to have that happen. You just can't, because you can't leave. You can't, get your own job. You're completely dependent. And so we get these subtle messages that we are not allowed to do things and that people will be killed or hurt or diminished. Now, when we're adults, like, for instance, when people say to me, oh, my God, I'm so afraid I'll be abandoned. An adult is not afraid of being abandoned in that way. We have capabilities. We'll feel sad, we'll feel upset, but we're not lost in space. A child is abandoned, it's really abandoned. So we get this sensation and we actually think that something is happening to us as an adult, but it's actually just a memory. I mean, I remember when I was about 40 and I realized there was a dynamic between me and my father that, if I was too successful, that he would be diminished. Now, that's not something my father consciously knew. If you asked him about it, he'd say that's ridiculous. But I remember being 40 and becoming very successful, and I said out loud to myself, you know what? If someone's going to die because I'm too successful, it's going to be my dad. It's not going to be me. And guess what? My dad's 91 and he hasn't died. But I became willing to say, all right, if that's what happens, that's his choice. But it's really not about that. It's about that I get a sensation. Your father is allowed to feel diminished, and he's a person. He'll handle it. But we function on these sensations as though we're little children, because that's where they come from. And we make choices that are... I remember I was with a therapist for a very long time, and I decided I needed to do something different and leave. And I said to her, I feel so guilty because I feel like my leaving... you might get depressed that I'm leaving. You might think badly of yourself. And she said to me, I might, but I'm an adult. If I get depressed, I'll deal with it. If I think badly of myself, I'll have to figure that out. This is not your job. And so we make up all sorts of blocks for ourselves simply because we're feeling a sensation that a child felt, and that a child felt we couldn't go near. It was too dangerous. It was too painful. And so, interestingly enough, by going near those sensations, by having them, not only do we get to choose our own thought, but we actually heal the child, because we actually are sitting with our inner child who was afraid to feel those, and we're feeling it, and we're not dying. And so that child with the memory may never lose the sensation, but will know that it can have that sensation, that everything's all right, because in essence it has a new parent, us. And it changes everything when you can really be with your experience, whatever it is. That's all we want, is to have our experience seen. You know, I say when traumatic things happen in childhood, it's not really the traumatic thing that is the problem. It's that it was not seen by an adult and some eyes looking at it saying, I see what you're going through, I see what you're feeling, I see that of course you feel that way. And I think that's why in a certain way we create the concept of God. We want somebody who sees us, knows our every move before we know it, knows what's going on. And there is a God inside of us. There is us who is able to experience whatever that child experiences at any time without judgment. And so it's sitting right here in us. And we are the savior of that child right inside of us.
And I love that, what you're saying about the God without judgment, the God without labels. And I've found that true in observing people over the last 20 years in ministry and as a life coach. And I'm sure you have too, as well as I do it to myself sometimes, is that a lot of us came from traditional religiosity. We came from a place that we were rarely okay, you know, and we were labeled all the time. You're a sinner, you're this, you're that, you're bad, you're worthless, you're not going to amount to anything. And then we come into this wide open, you know, Disney-like spiritual wonderland where, you know, I love myself the way I am. And what we don't often realize, or at least I find, David, is that we're still dragging along the labels. And we're not doing the labels that we used to. We're giving up a little bit of should. We're giving up a lot of that shame, but we're still, and we're not aware of it because we go around then saying, and it's just what you said at the beginning of the show, we start saying, oh, well, I don't mean to be negative. Or you may not want to hear me say this because you're going to think it's negative. And I love to say, I'm not going to think it's anything. I'm just going to think it's something that's important to you. And so I think that would be a good golden nugget for people to have as a takeaway. One of the main ones of the show today is to look at, why do you need to label where you are as anything? And like you're saying, just be in this is what's so. Right
and
here
the reason
now.
People need to label it is because they feel uncomfortable sensations. And so what has to happen, we came up this week, we really, as I said, been working with our little inner child. And so what I say to myself is, whatever I am thinking, like for instance, I'll give you an example. You know, I have 5 shows that I'm working on getting them to Broadway. Now, I have to say that I know that I can never get a show on Broadway. It'll never happen. I know that. I know it. Now, so most people would say, well, cancel. Don't have that negative thought. That's terrible. You have to have a positive thought. I go, David, given your history, it would stand to reason that you would know that you can't get a show on Broadway. It would stand to reason that you have that thought, and that thought sits in your mind all the time. You don't have to get rid of that thought. You have to notice that you have that thought. And once I know that, well, of course that thought makes sense. I don't have to squelch myself. That's like a child coming to you saying in pain, and you're saying, no, you're not in pain. You're positive. I notice that I have that thought, and I say, okay, of course you have that thought. I can get that you have that thought. I can see it. And the minute I do that, I'm capable of then saying, okay, now let's look at the whole universe. Is it possible in the universe for me to have a show on Broadway? Of course it's possible. And I don't have to get rid of that thought. So I'm feeling like writing a book, you know, The Power of Negative Thought, The Truth About Negative Thought. We're so afraid of negative thoughts. You have a negative thought, notice it, but know that it's a thought. You don't have to change it. You don't have to get rid of it. You don't have to anything. Just have it. And then you will immediately realize that since it's a thought and no thoughts are true, it's a thought you're having. It makes perfect sense. So you understand yourself. You're not judging yourself for it. In fact, it would be crazy for you not to have that thought given the experiences you had. And then you can look at the whole universe and go, and it's possible that while I have that thought, I mean, I've done 6 Broadway shows, and every one I was positive wouldn't open. Well, they opened. I just had that thought. That thought didn't mean anything. And so there's something we do where we say, no, get rid of that thought. We call it thought exchange because you're just looking at a thought and then looking at another thought. You're not changing a thought. You're not disappearing a thought. You're not getting rid of it. You're not saying, oh, my God, don't think that. That'll come true. Just you accept everything about yourself. I accept that when I'm going on a stage, I have the thought that I'm going to drop dead, that I have sensations, that my heart's pounding 90 miles an hour. I accept it. And it's an interesting thing. One of the very basic concepts of physics and of metaphysics is that what you resist persists, and what you don't resist disappears. It's quite well known. Now, I looked at that one day and I said, oh, well, that's interesting, because what happens? I take on a positive thought, and I'm happy I have it, so I don't resist it. So it disappears. Then I take on a negative thought. I resist it like crazy, so what does it do? It persists. So I thought, don't resist your negative thoughts, and they'll disappear. Resist them, and they'll stay right in place. So I just kind of noticed, oh, I think I can't do this while doing it.
That's so true. Well, we're enjoying our time with David Friedman today, author of The Thought Exchange, as well as an immensely talented musician and creator of music and you name it. He just has a multitude of talents, this man. And you can go to his website, thethoughtexchange.com. David Friedman, who is our guest today, is part of that mission as well, of decreasing stress in people's lives, of bringing families together. I know that when he worked with our spiritual community, we came together as a board and a staff and a team, and we had collectively around 30 people. And one of the things that he highlighted is, look what you're actually thinking about this place and the leaders of this place and everybody. That's the beauty of this work. Once you have the aha, or the epiphany, you can actually take it to a place of action, and it can be life-altering for you. David, I'm so proud of the work that you're doing, and I'm so proud to know that the work that you've done and how it's impacted and affected me as well as a person and as a human being. You were telling us before we went into the first segment about that you now have a documentary. Tell us about that and how people can know about it and find and watch it and get it.
Well, there was a documentary that was just released by Usher Morgan, a filmmaker, and it's about an hour and a half long, and it has interviews with me and interviews with people who have done thought exchange work with me and how it's influenced them, and it has stories, and it's a beautifully done piece, and it is a way, it's organized in a way that you can really get an understanding of what it is I'm doing. I mean, of course, reading my book is another way to do it, but this is in an hour and a half. I go through everything. It points out my work. It talks about what I've done. I tell my own life story in it, and what I love about it, I was very happy because the reviews have been coming in, and they've really been great, and what everybody has said is they don't feel like I'm, trying to proselytize or ram something down people's throat. I'm sharing something that I obviously use and that the people who talk about it obviously use as an offer, as a way to say, check this out, look at this, and see what your life can be. And, one of the things that we look at a lot of new thought, and the reason the Thought Exchange came about was I began to look at the things that were sort of, woo-woo, standard, this is the way it is, and I noticed that they didn't work for me. I noticed that when we kept trying to feel better, that didn't necessarily work. And one of the other big things is that our lives take place only inside of us in our experience. I like to say, Temple, I don't even know if you exist. I know that I'm experiencing talking to you right now, but that doesn't mean you're there. If I was having a dream, I'd experience you also. So all any of us have, is our experience, and everything we think we see out there in the world, we're only seeing it through our experience. So it could be said that the things of the world are just there as a fantastic mirror to just allow us to see what we're thinking and where we're limiting ourselves. And so we make the mistake of thinking that the world is set or that the idea is to get something in the world. And that would be like saying the idea is to get something in a mirror. And so once we understand how to use the world that way, for instance, then if I'm working with the church board, it's not a matter of, oh, well, you have to change your thoughts so that you can see something out there that's different. It's you're seeing something out there, which is your thoughts, so that you can make the changes in the only place changes can be made, which is inside. And when you have a greater awareness of unlimited possibility and of your innate goodness and of that, you're in no danger, you will naturally see a world that looks like that. But the world that looks like that is not the point. The point is it's all in you. And so the shift is not about stuff. The stuff is just a tool so that we can see what we're thinking, where we're limiting ourselves in the only place we can have experience, which is in our experience. So it changes the whole game. You no longer are trying to get money and relationship and stuff like that. I had a very funny thing happen in Thought Exchange. Somebody who's single said to me, well, but you're in a relationship. And I said, yes, and she said, well, at least you know that any time you have a problem, when you come home, you have someone there who always supports you and always agrees with you and I went, really? What?
Hello.
I have never seen a relationship like that. What I get in my relationship is what I think of myself. And so people have the idea that there's something in the outside world that's going to change them. There isn't. You're going to see yourself in the outside world. You're going to see what you think of yourself in the outside world. And once we know that, I do a lot of work in Fortune 500 companies, and they have what's called the 360, where they will take an executive and they will interview all the people who work for them, who he or she works for, and get their impressions of the executive. And, of course, as you can imagine, it's quite upsetting and shocking to sit down and just hear what everybody thinks of you. So before I read the information to the executive, I always say what you are about to hear is what you think of yourself. You are not, no one is judging you. You are being reflected in these people, and we are going to work not on changing these people's minds, but on what you're thinking of yourself, which they have very generously revealed to you. And so when you look at the world like that, the whole world changes because situations do not matter, and the biggest upset is only here to show us what we're thinking so that we can heal and be whole. That's all any upset is. And it just changes everything. You kind of go, this is what
it's
I'm
so
thinking.
True. It totally does. When you look at it from the perspective of when you're not really playing full out, when you're not really bringing all that you are to the experiences of your life, you really cheat other people from those experiences of the total you of wherever you could be in the moment. I think what I identified with you and we had talked about before is from feeling that scarring or that woundology as a teenager when it wasn't cool, in the 60s and 70s to be out. How I had this sensation, and as I look back now, through the years, the relationships that I sabotaged or the times I wouldn't show up at the banquet of life, as one would say, because I didn't want to be found out. I didn't want people to know about me. It's like if we were starting to get too close, the sensation would come over my body like, well, if you really find out, who my partner is, or you really find out that I'm gay, or you really find out this and that and this and that, you'll abandon me, you'll leave me, we won't ever connect. And it's amazing how even now, as a more aged person, I can be on a plane, I can be sitting by somebody, and we start doing the, surface chatting, which isn't always one of my favorite things anyway. But, one question leads to another. And since I did this work with you a year ago, I'm so much more conscious now of how I have a sensation of we are now entering the uncomfortable zone.
Right.
You know, I am starting
but that's
to be
very different than saying we are entering the danger zone. See,
Yes.
It's uncomfortable. It's not dangerous. And
No.
you certainly, if someone, because I used to get this, I'd be on planes and I'd be talking to business people and they'd say, and, who's your, are you married? And I'd say, I live with a man. And they could just take that. But, of course, you get a jolt in your body when you say that. And,
Yes.
and again, see, I know when I was, because I avoided being gay, I was married, and I remember thinking to myself, if I'm gay, I will have to kill myself. And as time went on, I became more comfortable with the sensations, and being gay and declaring that was the first time in my life that I decided that something going on inside of me was more important than what anybody thought outside of me. So actually that, coming to terms with that, gave me my whole life in a certain way. I suddenly was authentic. And to be authentic, I had to be uncomfortable. But that didn't mean I had to be hurt or in pain or whatever. I just had to feel the discomfort and not make up stories about it. And I know when I told my parents, when I got together with my first long-term relationship, and I told my parents, and I said to them, look, you have a choice. This is who I am. You can either accept it, and then you will be privy to how my love life is going, when I have trouble, when I'm happy, when I'm celebrating, when I'm going through something, and you will be part of my life. Or you cannot accept it, in which case my life will go on just as it went on before, except you won't be part of it. And I said, it's your choice. And my parents chose to accept it. And so they got to participate in my life. And but it wasn't about, if you don't accept it, my life's not going to be like this. Now, had they not accepted it, I probably would have felt a lot more sensations and noticed a lot more thoughts.
Right.
But really, as adults, we have to understand the difference between an adult and a child. It's not that an adult feels fine all the time. An adult can tolerate discomfort, and a child cannot. And I have someone who I had a lot of panic disorder when I was young, which is sort of the source of the thought exchange, because I dealt with sensations. And I work with a lot of people who have panic disorder. And this one guy said, how do you get on a plane? You know a plane could crash. And I said, yes, I do know it could crash. He said, well, how do you get on feeling totally comfortable knowing it could crash? I said, I don't feel totally comfortable. I know it can crash. I have some measure of discomfort about that, and I can tolerate that discomfort. And when I tolerate the discomfort, I'm quite aware that it would be quite unusual for it to crash, but it could, and so I have a little bit of discomfort. And that's what life is. It's filled. The people who are successful, Barbra Streisand is willing to experience the discomfort of going on stage with, 50,000 people out there. Believe me, she feels discomfort. She wants to be on stage enough to feel the discomfort. And where we get this notion that we're supposed to feel, comfortable and fine, and we look at other people and feel that they feel comfortable and fine, nobody does.
No, not at all.
No.
Well, in talking with our listeners today, what would you say, David, would be like one of the starting points of, like, would it be helpful if an individual journals or writes down, like, where they're lacking prosperity? And by prosperity, I mean a full perspective of prosperity in a healthy relationship, creative self-expression, abundant living, healthiness, the physicalness, healthy mind, all of that, the wide picture of what real prosperity truly is as far as I'm concerned. Would you look at each segment of your life in that way? And
I would actually, when I wrote the book, and the book is very detailed and goes into all sorts of areas in great detail, and mostly it's about how I went down a path, thought something was true, then found out where it failed and went the other way. But the whole book boils down to one thing. If you do one thing, experience your sensations. So whenever you are troubled, whenever you think, I don't have enough money, I can't find a partner, I'm sick, there's no way to get better, there's no way for this to happen, stop and go to your body and say, what am I experiencing in my body? And we're not talking about anger, sadness, or whatever. We're talking about tightness, hotness, coldness, shaking, emptiness, fullness, bubbling, and just go to your body, because all of these thoughts of lack are here to get away from our sensations. The minute we go to our sensations, we open the doorway to unlimited possibilities. I know it sounds ridiculously simple, but for instance, I was on a West Coast book tour, and I arrived in Los Angeles. Now, I haven't been in Los Angeles for a few years, but I conducted a lot of Disney movies in Los Angeles. I had a big career in Los Angeles. And I arrived in Los Angeles, and as I landed, I felt the most horrible, sinking feeling in my chest. And I noticed I was thinking, I'm such a failure. Boy, all those years in Los Angeles, I never accomplished anything. I never did anything. I have no money. I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills. Now look, even the rental car bus drove by me without stopping for me. And now the rental car cost $100 more than I thought it would, which means I'm going to run out of money. I watched myself go from slight discomfort to imminent death in about, 5 minutes. And then I said, whoa, wait a minute, stop. Feel that sensation in your chest. And I just felt it. And I felt it for about 3 days, and I realized that all my years in L.A., even though they were very successful, the reason I was trying to be a star was so that I could get away from that sinking feeling that I've always had, that had to do with much earlier stuff. And no matter how big a star you become, that sinking feeling is not affected by that. And that's why big stars are often miserable, because they think, wow, the whole world is cheering for me, and yet it's not enough. And so I sat with it for 3 days, and while sitting with it, I had a wonderful time with my friends. I gave a wonderful talk. I enjoyed myself. I even had business things happen. And I got back to that, I've spent my life pushing and forcing and thinking I don't have anything to get away from that feeling. It's just a sensation. It's just a sensation. And I had it, and I sort of incorporated it. And so, it's interesting. I went to a concert the other night of one of the most major superstars in the world. And he had done 3 sold-out performances for over 5,000 people, and with people screaming and standing and yelling and singing along. And I went backstage to see him, and the first thing he said to me was I good? Mm-hmm. And I think if you don't know that, with everybody screaming, and I realized, you inside are just a person, and in a way you may be a person who has a lot of emptiness and sadness, which has made you write beautiful songs and sing them, but a million people screaming for you is not going to heal that. The only thing that's going to heal that is being with it yourself and accepting that, of course, you feel that way. But what happened? And it doesn't matter what, fabulous successes you have. So I would say what I'd love people to try, since our whole culture has been geared to, oh, my God, you have a headache? Take an aspirin. Take something. No pain. Stop and experience your sensations. Don't try and figure out your problem. Don't try and figure out how you're going to get out of it. It's not even a problem. It's just there to send you back to your sensations. It's just a mirror telling you there's something you're running from. Just experience it inside of you as a pure sensation, and you will notice that suddenly your world opens. Suddenly you get ideas. Suddenly things start to happen. Suddenly you're open to things. Because in so many cases, our whole lives have been about avoiding our very experience.
That's so true. Wow, that's powerful. And we're going to delve right back into that when we come back after break. We'll be right back. Well, thank you for everyone for participating in our show today as we're listening to David Friedman. I'd encourage you to go to his website, thethoughtexchange.com, and order the documentary. I would also encourage you to read the book, to look at your organizations, your corporations, as well as your families, and look at how you could make a difference in exchanging the thought that you find yourself having, which up till now has either limited you or held you back from an amazing life in one way or another, and be willing to invest the time to change. You know, the whole axiom is if we keep doing what we've always been doing, guess what? We'll keep getting what we've always got. And individuals like David that give us these concepts, they really do work. And I think that's important. It doesn't matter who you are, how famous you are, how much money you have, how much love you have in your life or anything. It's just like what David is sharing today. There's always a way that we can sit in front of the classroom, take notes, we can benefit, and we can make a shift in our lives. So, right. David, thank you for the gifts that you are giving us today. Really, really appreciate that, because what you're talking about, I love that statement, and a number of people have been given the credit for it, most of all Ralph Waldo Emerson, but it's the quote, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. And that's exactly what you're talking about, because when you're comfortable with yourself, it doesn't matter how you show up at the grocery store, how you show up on stage, how you show up in the newspaper, or wherever you are, or at home with your loved one. You are expressing authentically, and therefore, in that mirror, you expect to receive the same. And
you just see it. It's one thing. Yeah, it's one thing. It's just your experience. You know, I always say if you look in a mirror, you see yourself. And the interesting thing is you see yourself in whatever mirror you look in. So the point is, if you have the thought that you are not good, you will see that when you're poor. You will see that when you're very wealthy. You will see that when you're not in a relationship. You will see that when you're in a relationship. Circumstances will not change. You will see your thought of poverty or of lack or whatever in everything. There is no amount of money, there is no amount of love, there is no amount of possessions that can change that one bit. That's why people so often win the lottery and end up right back where they started, because your consciousness, your interior, it's not even like the purpose is you're causing things to happen. Your consciousness is it. It's the whole ball game. It's the whole ball of wax. All you are is your interior experience. And all you're seeing is yourself. They're really, you know, when they say we are one, the only way I know that there is another person is within me. So that means that all the people I know and all the things I see only appear to me in me. So everything is happening inside of me. Wars around the world are happening inside of me only. There's no such thing as outside of me. I'm experiencing them inside of me. So everything anybody does to you is really just happening inside you. And that sort of freaks people out, but that's why we're all one, because there is nothing other than each of our experiences. And that's one thing. And when we know that, our focus changes. We stop pretending that, oh, if I could just get here or get this or that or get this position or get, whatever, I'll be fine. It's not going to make a bit of difference. And when you change something inside of you, and you're not really even changing it, you're just revealing it, because it's all sitting here all the time. You're just not noticing it. When you reveal something inside of you, you are revealing a piece of experience, a piece of possibility, a piece abundance, as you described it before, and all of a sudden the entire world, which is only existing inside of you, becomes more abundant, more fruitful. You see everything as wonderful. You see everything as full. You see everything as it is, which is unlimited. But it's not outside. It ain't outside. It's in our experience, and the way to get to that is sensations. It is experiencing what you experience in your body rather than going to what I call protective thoughts. These thoughts that we think are negative, like, I'll never do this, I'll never have this, oh, it's going to be terrible, they're just us trying to protect ourselves from sensations that we don't need protection from. We can just feel them. And that changes the world. It just, you notice when I have sensations right now that when I was 20 and having panic disorder, I thought I was dying. Now I go, having that sensation. It's nothing. It's just nothing. I'm almost not aware that I have it. If I look, I see, I have a funny band around my eyes that I used to be very scared of. Now it's just the band that David has around his eyes.
Mm-hmm. And the difference is with you is that it's simply there, but it didn't stop you. I would imagine that, and I thought this was a pertinent question to ask you, because I know, like for myself, I've been speaking a long time, for many years, and what I love about speaking is that you learn in every talk you ever give. So it's sure. Never like, oh, I've arrived, oh, look at me, oh, I'm sitting back, oh, I'm fine, I'm good, because every time I show up in front of a group of people, I never know how it's going to go,
Right.
And so I love that. I love that edge. I love that sensation of uncertainty. I love the possibility that microphone may not work and I get to tell somebody to turn me on in front of people. There's always possibilities of, what can happen. But I noticed that when I went then into the forum of being an author, then I started feeling different sensations. And a lot of people that are out there now and people that are listening to this show, they would have felt those sensations and they would have not moved forward because they would have said, oh, this is awkward. It's probably not mine to do. And so having said that, tying it back into you, with you being such an accomplished songwriter and musician, performer, just incredible work and background that you have, did you go through sensations when you were first getting the inkling to author a book?
Oh my God. In fact, when the book came out, because writing a book was a dream of mine, a big dream of mine, but of course that thought came with a lot of resistance. There was the positive thought. Now, when my book actually came out, I remember having the thought, isn't this just terrible? Just when my book comes out, I have a terminal illness. Because I felt so sick when my book came out. But I knew that it is me having the sensations that I was avoiding by not having a book come out. And so it always happens. I love this. I had someone in Thought Exchange, and she was a fundraiser, and she noticed that she was not raising funds. And so I said, well, next time you go to raise funds, notice your sensations. So she went to the phone, and she noticed that she had a huge hot flash as she was picking up the phone. So she felt the hot flash, she picked up the phone, and she raised a lot of money. So the thought we took on was, here's a hot flash, I'm a great fundraiser.
I love it.
So she gets a hot flash every time she picks up the phone. That's what she gets. And so for me, I'm on the Today Show once a month. I write a song once a month for the Today Show that it's sung by a Broadway star. It's a segment called Everyone Has a Story, and people call in, write in with their stories, and Kathy Lee Gifford and I write a song. We bring a Broadway star to sing it to them. Every month when I get that assignment, I know that I can't write the song. I am aware that that is a protective thought against the sensation that I get when I have to write a song, so I feel the sensation, and I sit down and write the song, usually in about 20 minutes. And so it's just the way it is. Now, if people believe those thoughts, they're only doing that because they can't tolerate the sensation that goes with writing a song, or speaking. Now, for instance, you said something very interesting, which is, I really enjoy the idea that something could go wrong, that it's different every time. Some people would say, I am totally terrified of that idea. It's the same thing. You just enjoy it. You feel as much nerves as they do. You feel as much stuff as they do, but you view it as excitement, and they view it as terror. In fact, it's neither. It's just what is.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely what is. It's so true, what you're saying, because these things that seem like the great big green monsters in the beginning, because when I first started as a speaker, I certainly didn't feel that way. I just wanted to survive it.
Right. I know the feeling. When I started conducting on Broadway, that was what? Yeah.
I used to tell people would say to me, well, what did you do in the first years when you offered classes? I said, I didn't want to offer any. And when I did, I hoped people wouldn't show up.
Right.
It's hard to believe. Can you imagine? I'm giving out a flyer and I'm promoting a class that I hope nobody will even come to. That would have been what I would have considered one of my better days. But I think the point, especially in people that know me and how I speak today, or more importantly, someone as accomplished as you, of just the value of people understanding that you being out there in the world and who you are on the Today Show, you're there because you didn't let these sensations ever stop you. I want to encourage everybody that's listening to pass the show on to your friends and put it on your Facebook and Twitter, and let people out there in the world know that it's time, really, in 2012, it's really time to let go of any type of fear that's holding us back. I'm Temple Hayes, and you've been listening to From Good to Amazing with the wonderful David Friedman. Please go and visit his website, thethoughtexchange.com. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this wonderful voice of an awakening world. God bless you, everyone. Namaste.